When you think of healthcare, when you think of hospitality, when you think of trucking, they had to respond during the pandemic the entire time, as did we here at Boys and Girls Clubs. We stayed open the entire time. But there's a lot of sectors out there still, the legal sector, the financial sector, that have really adopted these hybrid models, these work from home. And so, you don't have a workforce where we're all in the same section anymore. We now have really broadened what we allow. And I don't know if we can take it away.
Erin Porteous, welcome back to the Today Counts show. You have become as regular as anybody on this new show. And I must say you are looking all dressed up and beautiful today. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be on, I'll call it season 2. We made it to the next season.
Yeah. You just got back from Iceland. I've seen pictures of Iceland. I don't have it on my to list, but what were you doing there?
So I was there with a business forum called YPO. And so we were out there kind of on an adventure visit. We did rafting, we went snowmobiling, we climbed the glaciers, we hiked in a few caves. It's incredible scenery. It's a beautiful mix of a volcanic island that is still active, but also just great geography and cool features with a lot of green contrasted with snow and water. And so it was a neat place to go, and very quaint, a very European feel when you get into the little fishing villages. I've had my share of fish for the rest of 2022. I don't need any more of that. And cold weather. I've got that checked off as well.
Well, good. I'm glad you got to check those two things off. How long were you there?
Just there for the weekend. It's a direct flight
wow.
from Denver, so they make it really easy on you.
Wow. How long of a flight was that? Do you remember?
It's 8 hours.
8 hours. So that's not fun. Okay. And YPO stands for Young Professionals. Is it organization? Is that what it is? YPO?
Yep. Young Presidents Organization.
Well, I have, in my career, I have enjoyed speaking to groups like that in various, because most of them are hungry and thirsty for becoming better at, being leaders, which of course is not simply about strategic goals and strategic plans and tactics, but it's very, 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 very much about people. And I think we all learn that sooner or later, that leadership is probably more about people than it is about anything else. So that's neat that you could go there with some like-minded people that are eager to grow. And of course, that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about leadership, and we want to kind of leave off where we did last time. Your podcast was very popular, and so it wasn't hard to give you a ring, although we talk often. It wasn't hard to give you a ring and say, hey, let's do this again. We were talking last time about the pandemic, and at some point we're all going to get tired of talking about the pandemic. Maybe we already are, but I'm still seeing a lot of residual effects of the pandemic. Let me just throw a question out for you to get us started. You reminding the listeners, you are the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Denver. And your current annual budget is what?
We're close to 20 million, and we're serving over 20,000 kids in the Denver metro area every day after school.
20 million and 20,000 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And that's a large organization. That's a large for-profit organization. Multiply that by probably 10, and that's the equivalent of running a nonprofit. Peter Drucker said in the latter years of his life that one of the regrets that he had is that he didn't start getting into the advisory, consulting, coaching business with nonprofits until he was much later in his years. And it was his conviction that he found some of the best leaders in the world who were leading nonprofits. And I know that's a circle that you belong in, and you take it very seriously. But as the CEO of this large nonprofit organization, there's going to be people leaning forward, listening to this, so to speak. Leaders that are running, they're entrepreneurs, they're running their own business. They might be executives in corporate America, or they might have dreams to solve a problem, and their dreams might cost 5 million a year, or 20 million a year, or 100 million a year, to do that. And money is a resource. But let's bring it back to this pandemic. What have you learned in general, whether it's about leadership, people, money, culture? I'm just opening those doors for you. What have you learned since this pandemic began to today?
So interestingly enough, you and I had our last podcast, I think it was March. And so here we are 6 months later.
Yeah.
And one of my observations about COVID is the further it gets in our rear view, still acknowledging there's a presence, right? But the pandemic part of it, the total disruption to personal, professional life feels further and further away for most of us. That you get to look back and you get to have some moments of reflection versus while we were in it, right? There was just react, right? And respond, react and respond. That's what was called upon of leaders and nearly everyone during that chapter. And so now you get to kind of reflect a little bit more and say, okay, here's what I've kind of taken away, and here's how I can better plan. Being in the kit business, we're going into another cold and flu season. And so we have a COVID crisis team prepared, right? We're ready for whether it's cohort models or masking models. We have to have all of that in the queue as we come up here in the cold and flu season. That said, what I take away from it is oftentimes leaders have to make decisions. And sometimes they get to know 60% of the information, they get to know 75% of the full equation, and they have got to call the ball. And in COVID, we had 10% of the info, maybe less, especially in the last couple of years. Those values are not these 3 core values or 5 or even 10. The value structure is much more vast. So trying to navigate that as an employer and you're trying to attract great talent, it looks different. I think a great example of this is it's not just about what compensation is anymore, right? How much am I going to make this year? The number of people that I've met with who we want to hire who want to talk about flexibility, right? I want to be able to work from home. I want remote time. That was never a discussion 5 years ago. And so we've had to change our value premise, whatever, were kind of the core values, to be open to many, many more that are now out there. What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. Before I throw my ideas at that, let me ask you a question. Do you think that's here to stay, or do you think that's a bridge to what was?
I think it's here to stay. I mean, because of the way that overall sectors have responded, if it does go away, Jim, I think it's a ways down the line. And let me explain that. When you think of healthcare, when you think of hospitality, when you think of trucking, they had to respond during the pandemic the entire time, as did we here at Boys and Girls Clubs. We stayed open the entire time. But there's a lot of sectors out there still, the legal sector, the financial sector, that have really adopted these hybrid models, these work from home. And so, you don't have a workforce where we're all in the same section anymore. We now have really broadened what we allow. And I don't know if we can take it away. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think some of that we're going to have to live and therefore learn. I'll just speak to my experience. I see, in our Lead Today community and the people that we work with, the leaders that we work with, we are seeing some bring in their scaling. Instead of trying to do what they used to do, they're responding by building a stronger core team where they can have a negotiated or collaborated, might be a better word, a collaborated value system and then work from there. What I'm hearing in the feedback, you asked me, what I'm hearing in the feedback is that the question is, does the culture shape leaders, or are leaders shape culture? And that's a philosophical question. It's probably both. I would guess. So there's some opportunity for leaders to shrink back a little bit, to circle the wagons a little bit, to go back to some of those basic things, like whatever professionalism means to them, and see if they can recruit, onboard, train, affirm, and develop a culture that is truly unique. I think, here's what I think. You asked me what I think. I think that it gives the leader of the right height to paint a new masterpiece on a blank canvas. I think that a lot of what we have seen in failed businesses, and I know this is going to sound harsh, Erin, but I don't, even though it's going to sound harsh, darn it. Even though it's going to sound harsh, it doesn't change my anecdotal view, not statistical, not scientific, but I think in time, if you can measure such a thing, and I'm leading up to it, I'm walking on the diving board, I'm getting close to the edge to tell you what I'm talking about, is that a hot economy forgives poor leadership. But when things begin to fall apart, somebody is no longer going to get away with false height. And I'm gonna steal a story that I just heard yesterday. A mom who is also a consultant, a team consultant, a leadership consultant, talked about that they were at an amusement park at one time, and her little boy wanted to get on this, something of doom, and the mom did not want the little boy to get on. So, she thought that she'd be really smart, thinking that he was too short to get on the ride, and took him up to the measuring, stick or ruler, whatever that thing is, right? And you had an adolescent there that was the gatekeeper, and this little boy had a spiked hairstyle going on. I mean, really, I guess exaggerated. And the mom certainly didn't, take that into consideration. But the hairs, touched the minimum area, and so they lit the kid on. And of course, the mom wasn't going to be able to, without an emotional outburst, keep that kid from getting on there. Well, that kid got on there, and as I understand it, it took 3 years for him to recover to try to get onto any ride that looked anything, near that scary. So my point is that I think my viewpoint on where are we going is that in a lot of ways the deck has been cleared, and the real leaders who are standing in their true height will have an opportunity to build a organization and to build a culture and to build a team that fits. I also hope that hiring will become, and you know how I feel about hiring, because if I were to write a book about my leadership failures, hiring would certainly be towards the front of that book.